Welcome back to Bone Up on Business. I'm your host, Joyce Bone. Next up, we have Joe Nicassio with RapidResultsMarketing.com. We're going to be discussing a practical approach for creating jobs. And basically, Joe's going to share with us about how a thriving economy tomorrow starts by nurturing entrepreneurs today. So welcome to the show, Joe. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, Joe's advised over 500 business owners in 100 different industries, and he's the author of Resurrecting America's Entrepreneurial Spirit. And who doesn't want their spirits raised? So let's just jump right in, and I'm going to ask you, Joe, where do jobs come from?
Jobs come from thriving businesses, and thriving businesses come from inspired entrepreneurs. And today we've got a problem where so many people, they're actually afraid of starting a business. And so, but ultimately, they come from people like you and me. Jobs come from entrepreneurs.
That's true. Well, I think that most people, when they get something in their mind, they just can't be stopped when it comes to starting a business. So you feel like some people are pulling back rather than expanding?
Absolutely. What inspired me to write this book was I gave a lecture about 7 years ago to a group of 50 people in a room. They all had bachelor's, masters, and PhDs. And I asked how many would like to own your own business, and 60% raised their hand. And I asked how many of you are afraid of starting your own business, and 100% of the hands went up. Interesting.
I'm wondering where entrepreneurs come from in that case.
Well, entrepreneurs are just people like you and me. They're people that are filled with the spirit of creativity that want to offer value to the marketplace. They typically are innovators, but they don't have to be. Sometimes we think, somebody has to invent an iPhone to start their own business, but there are many entrepreneurs that make a good living doing things like, cleaning carpets or handyman services or babysitting or doing acting lessons. So they come from all over the place, but entrepreneurs they're not special people in the terms, they don't have a special gene, or an extra strand of DNA. They're just normal people like you and me.
So I personally think that most entrepreneurs, not all, but a lot of them, are the C students of the world. Because the A students are the ones sitting in that auditorium raising their hand saying that they want to be business owners, but they don't, they use education as their vehicle to get into corporate work, whereas the C student might not have always felt like they fit into that structure. So therefore, they're more apt to go out and create their own destiny because, they have faith in their abilities, but maybe the rest of the world doesn't. I know I was just reading about Truett Cathy, and that is one of the things that he said, that when he goes out and speaks, he always asks, who's the C students in here? He's like, you're the ones who are going to lead the world. What do you think about that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's a paradigm where we have so many people on Occupy Wall Street today that are, looking for that job, and it's really a function of social programming. We've told kids for multi-generations, go to school, get a good education, and get a job. And if that's the programming you get, that's what you're going to do. And like you said, the A students are all on that track. Mm-hmm. But, go to school, get a good education, get a good job, or start your own business is the dialogue that really needs to change. That's the paradigm shift that will... if we want to have a thriving economy tomorrow, we need to nurture entrepreneurs today. And in my book, I propose that we put Entrepreneur 101 in every high school. Because today, if you want a dream job, you may need to create it yourself.
That's the truth. And it takes a lot of work. So in your book, you have 21 spirit killers and spirit builders. Why don't you share some of those?
Sure. The biggest spirit killer is the fear of failure. It's like if I start a business, there's all these scary statistics of business failure. But when I went to the Small Business Administration website, I found many, many studies, and they're not just all about failure. There are many statistics of what exactly it takes to succeed. So the way that you overcome the fear of failure is you focus on doing everything right. If you do everything right in your business, you will succeed. It's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first one. Number two, I would say, is having a real clarity of purpose. Being clear what business you want to go in, what your value proposition is to your customers. Money comes to those who crave value. So if you're foggy, that's going to kill your spirit. And if you're crystal clear, it's going to be a lot easier to succeed in your business. Would you like me to give you a couple more?
Well, in fairness to people, I think that getting clarity is a really difficult task that oftentimes takes time. I think a lot of businesses, when they start out in one mindset saying this is what we're going to do, and then the marketplace responds and tells them, hey, this is what we actually want, and then you have to adjust and mold to what your customers actually want. And so clarity sometimes is an evolutionary thing.
You know what? That's really true. Let me give you two pieces of getting more clear. There was a book written in the 70s called Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. And I really think it really is important that what you're doing does bring some joy to your heart, because if it's miserable, you're not going to get excited about getting up every morning. Matter of fact, somebody recently shared with me, they used to work with Anthony Robbins, and they asked Anthony Robbins, what do you do to motivate yourself every day? And he says, I don't need to motivate myself. My vision is so large that it pulls me. And so that's part of it. Do what you love and the money will follow. But the other part comes from a man named Gary Halbert. And he was conducting a seminar with a lot of marketing geniuses. And he asked the group, he says, if you were opening a restaurant and you could have one advantage over every other restaurant, what would it be? And he went around the room and he got a bunch of good answers. One was location, location, location. Another person said, I want the best chef, the best food. Another person said, I'd want the cheapest food. People don't want to pay top dollar. Another person said, I'd want ambience. I'd want a real comfortable environment for people. And another person said, I'd want the best customer service. And he said, fine, those are all good answers. And then he said, if I had a restaurant and I could have one advantage over all others, I'd want a starving crowd. If I had
That's a good one.
If I had a starving crowd, people would go off the beaten path. They wouldn't care about location. If I had a starving crowd, it doesn't matter if I'm serving lobster or hot dogs. They're starving. They'll eat whatever I feed them. And if I have a starving crowd, they'll eat off the street. They don't care about ambience. And if I have a starving crowd, you can even be a little bit rude to them. And so you need to combine these two things of do what you love and the money will follow, and then really be sensitive to the marketplace. What's the marketplace, truly starving for? What are they hungry for? And that's kind of a starting point of where you get that clarity of what business to go in.
Well, I was going to ask you, how do you decide which business to start? So you're saying starving customers are always good.
Combine what you love
with passion, right?
Yeah, your passion, what you're good at, and be sensitive to what people want.
Well, that's good advice. So I also think that when people are afraid of failure, really, to me, there's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. Now, I guess there is a failure if you fail to keep going, but if you're 100% committed to, something, when you quote unquote fail, you'll turn that failure into a lesson and use it as feedback and keep going. That's
true. And, fear of failure is a funny thing. It's like we're not afraid of, when we walk, falling on our butts. And when we were babies, we got up and we fell, and we got up and we fell, and we got up and we fell many times. And so, one of the ways that we overcome the fear of failure is to properly educate ourselves. And this is why we have such a huge unemployment problem in the country, is a complete lack of entrepreneurial education. If you had Entrepreneur 101 and Entrepreneur 102 when you were in high school, would you be afraid of failing as much as if you had no such classes as part of your core educational competency.
Well, obviously, you would want to have that class to help build your confidence levels. So I agree with you that certainly this needs to be something that's brought into the school system. Unfortunately, public schools seem to, their agenda seems to be creating the cogs of society rather than the entrepreneurs. So,
well, that's one of the reasons in my book. Not only did I suggest we put Entrepreneur 101 in every school, but I actually put a suggested curriculum.
So what's some of those classes that you would recommend them taking?
Oh, Business Ethics 101, Fundamentals of Selling, Proven Marketing Principles, Fundamentals of Business Law, saving money to finance your future, creative finance, including barter, business creativity, corporate structures, accounting basics, and delegation and team building skills.
Sounds like an MBA in entrepreneurship.
Well, yeah, but it's actually life skills. See, here's the thing. If you have, I believe there's no such thing as unemployment. Okay, if you have a business and you got 100 customers, if you lose a customer, you got 99 customers. If you have a job, you are self-employed with one customer. And if you're unemployed, you're still self-employed. You just have no customers. So the moment that you provide any kind of value to another human being, you have just self-employed yourself. And the problem with the whole mentality, see, here's the thing. You're either self-reliant, which is the entrepreneur, or you're employer-reliant. And the problem with being employer-reliant is nobody really owes anybody anything. Nobody really owes anybody a job. So if you're not employer-reliant or self-reliant, you end up becoming government-reliant or charity-reliant or family-reliant. And nobody really wants to end up there.
No, they don't. I have to say, Kennesaw State has which is the school I graduated from, has a great entrepreneur program there. And I do see other schools, like I recently had lunch with the professor of entrepreneurship at Georgia State, are really trying to fill those needs now, that with the economy shifting the way it has. So that's heartening, but it would be wonderful to get it down into the younger grades. Even as young as elementary school would be a wonderful place to start. I was actually...
check this out.
Yeah?
Check this out. Okay. Children are born as geniuses and conditioned in the mediocrity. Children are born as salespeople. Mommy, will you buy me a candy bar? No. Mommy, will you buy me a candy bar? No. But after mom says no 10 times, baby comes back and says, 11 times, keeps asking, and baby eventually gets the sale. But what happens is when youth are maybe in the neighborhood of 8 or 9 or 10 years old, they actually unlearn how to sell. What we do is we shove them in the world and say, okay, go raise money for soccer uniforms or for band uniforms or for an educational trip. And we send them out to sell without sales training. And I call this an entrepreneurial crime against children. Because what happens is they go up to total strangers, say, would you like to buy some candy? No. Would you like to buy some candy? No. Would you like to buy some candy? No. And after they've been rejected 5, 10, 15, 20 times, if they last that long, they've reconditioned their brain to say, selling sucks. I don't want anything to do with it. And they develop something, I call it transactophobia, which is the fear of doing any kind of sales transaction. And they actually develop a fear of rejection, and then they've cursed themselves. They've put themselves in a neuro-linguistic curse where they actually are phobic of going into selling in the future, which, of course, is detrimental to any kind of entrepreneurial success they may have in the future. And so to overcome that, we need to teach kids. Every M&M bag has a satisfaction guarantee on it. If you can teach a child to point to the guarantee, they'll do better. If you teach a child, instead of saying, would you like to buy some candy, but if you taught them, would you like to buy some candy, and the reason why is we're raising money for an educational trip, they'll have a much higher level of success.
Personally, I think a little butt kicking here and there doesn't hurt anybody. Toughens up their skin, but I know what you're saying.
If you at least prepare them for the butt kicking, then they'll know that there's a prize on the other side.
Right.
If all they get is just butt kicking and without any kind of
it's about guidance
or nurture. Yes, they need to be guided.
Right. And it's interesting. I have a fourth grader, and when I was talking to him last night, we were talking about inventions and licensing versus distribution yourself. And he's like, how did we get on this conversation? I'm like, I'm not really sure, but it's fun. He's like, yeah. So they're definitely receptive. And I think some kids, when they get out there and they're selling those Girl Scout cookies or, whatever it is, they can actually, they find they thrive in that. So I know myself, I remember being in Latin club in high school. I was forced into it, let me just tell you that. And they made us go sell donuts. And I just went out and sold 60 boxes of donuts in, like an hour. And I came home, and then the next day they were announcing it in class how much everybody had sold. And it was like, George, 0. Bill, 2. Joyce, 60. And I was like so embarrassed. I had sold so many donuts. But it became easy to me. So I always knew, from high school on, and I got thrown out of class on a daily basis from geography for talking too much. And, lo and behold, that's what I get paid to do today. So, it's not always, sometimes you can see maybe not recognize them, but learn in time what your strengths are through your childhood experiences, both good and bad.
Well, the thing about strength is it's like we all have muscle fibers, and if you exercise your muscles, they get stronger, and if you don't exercise them, they get weak and atrophy. And I believe we have entrepreneurial muscle fibers and creativity muscle fibers just as much. And so what happens is when we, poor George, he sold no donuts. It's like if he didn't jump back in, then and get some sales, then his muscle fibers over time would just get weak, his entrepreneurial fibers. Mm-hmm. And so, it's really good that you had that experience, and your children are blessed because they've got an entrepreneurial mother, children don't lack capacity, they lack mentors.
Exactly. That is such a key piece of it right there, is having mentorship. There's such a need for that with the young people, because the natural entrepreneurs, if you just give them a little bit of like a dying plant, if you just water them a little bit, they'll spring up and do what they need to do to make things happen. It's just a serious lack of knowledge. You had mentioned Tony Robbins before, and that was like the first motivational thing I'd ever heard in my life when I was, 20-something years old, that and the book Think and Grow Rich. And between those two, I was able to start businesses and grow and go. Never look back. But I was like, wow, I never even knew this existed until I was well into my 20s. So, the fact that you advocate to start this younger with the school system, I think is right on.
Yeah, we've got, for all these people that are marching on Occupy, these people just need somebody to set them aside and mentor them and find out, what are you good at?
Right, and help them get going.
How can we match you up with what the marketplace needs? Because there's a place for everyone, but everybody hasn't found their place.
Right.
And they just lack the mentorship.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to give you enough time to get out your information on your book so that people who are looking for some mentoring can buy your book and start reading up on what the next best step would be for them. Okay.
The book is called Resurrecting America's Entrepreneurial Spirit. And the subtitle is A Practical Approach for Creating Jobs, even if it's just your own. And it's available on Amazon.com. And my website is rapidresultmarketing.com. And I'm really actually trying to get this book into the entire political dialogue, because I'm the author of a book on job creation, but through a very different approach, and that's that whole nurturing entrepreneurs.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing today, Joe. We really appreciate it. And everybody go to rapidresultsmarketing.com. Thank you so much. We'll be right back after this brief break.